Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to tonight's second bonus. Before we jump into it, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment and share the video. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter, and they are appreciated. And with that, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to tonight's second bonus, shall we? Tonight's second bonus is an interview with a gentleman who I do consider to be an expert in this field. He has been researching cryptids, Dogman, Bigfoot, and all sorts of high strangeness longer than many of us have even known about these things. So with that being said, I give you Tim Coonbo Baker. Mr. Tim Coonbo Baker on with us. He is a man that has a lot of experience, 40 some years of experience, and a lot of tales to share. And I am grateful that we have him with us tonight to share some of those. Coonbo, how are you?
Doing very well, thank you.
Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate that. Now, like I said, I don't really have a format. Everybody knows that. So I guess pretty much I'll start off with a question, and then we'll just go into it, and however it goes, it goes. What got you interested and into the field of cryptid research, Bigfoot, Dogman research?
Well, people that have heard me talk before, they've heard. I'm sure they've heard me say this, that I was raised on a farm in northwest Alabama, and this was a farm that had and still has Bigfoot that live on it, and I became aware of these things when I was just a very, very young kid, and around the time I was just old enough to start, having clear memories of things that I still retain to this day. I was 2 years old, and I can remember some incidents that happened, and it was pretty scary and all, and I can remember hearing them screaming, sometimes even during the day, but usually late afternoon and into the night. And the house that I was raised in up until the 5th grade, it was out in the country on our farm, and for the first several years of my life, we didn't have air conditioning, so at night in the summertime we slept with the windows open, and I had an attic fan that ran and pulled air in, the cool night air. Hopefully it was cool in the windows and across our beds, and of course you'd hear everything that went on out there. And I can remember just from the little bitty thing, hearing the vocalizations and such, And one thing that really still sticks with me very strongly was when I was about 3 years old. We were playing around outside and over near my grandmother's house. My grandmother lived across a 20-acre field, or half of a square 40 from straight north of us, and so that's about 220 yards walk. And I was allowed, even as a little bitty kid, to walk over there, to go over there, and or either my mom or somebody would take me over there. But anyway, we were outside playing, and it was getting dusky dark, and heard something started screaming, down in the lane north of our cattle corral and our horse stables. And immediately, my grandmother and the two ladies, there were three families besides. There were five families that lived on our farm when I was growing up, and there were one of the families ran our sawmill. Another family, the patriarch of the family, he was my dad's sort of ramrod, sort of the manager of the farm or whatever. And then the other family was they worked there on the farm. And anyway, but the mothers and my grandmother came out and started, rounding us kids up and getting us in the house when this thing started yelling. And I remember asking, what is that? What is that? And of course I'd heard the noise before, but never that close. And they said, "It's just that old catamount." That's what my dad and my grandfather called it, was catamount. And now in some parts of the country, a catamount's a cougar, but no, the word Bigfoot hadn't been invented. This was about 1957, and the word Bigfoot hadn't been invented for another 10 years probably. And so they had a lot of other names for them. Some of the people called them no heads. Some people called them, they called them boogers, hanks, goat men, wild men, hairy men, just all kind of names. But in fact, if you can, one of the roads that comes onto the northeast corner of our farm is called No Head Hollow Road. And that was one of their main travel routes, up and down this hollow. And if you wonder why they call them no heads, get online and look up the cover of, or the poster or whatever from The Legend of Boggy Creek. There's a picture of one going away from you, and you don't see its head. Or go to the GCBRO website and look at their main logo, and you'll see why they call them no heads. But an interesting thing, if you follow No Head Hollow out, and it runs basically from down around the Tennessee River at the northwest end of it, and follow it to the cross country up away from the river, you'll be going to the southeast. And when the hollow runs out, just keep going straight in that direction. You'll go over a low ridge, and you'll come down into what's called Booger Bottom. But anyway, back to the story. We hear this thing yelling and everything, and my mom came over. My grandmother made me go in their house. Well, my mom came over, picked me up, and took me home, and we're eating, and the thing's getting louder and stuff. We go to bed that night, and I'm laying up there on in the bed, and I can hear this thing screaming, and you can tell it's slowly getting closer. And there's a gate that's right there, sort of in between the old tractor shed and this storage shed, which is, you go through that, and you go through that gate, and you come out, and you can go to go to the right, and you go right to my grandparents' house, about 40, 50 yards away. Go to the left, you go to to my dad, the farm manager's house, and about 35 yards away, go to the southeast, and about 75, 80 yards, and you go to the folks' house that run the sawmill. And that old gate was an old cheap stamped steel and stamped out galvanized steel. And anybody that's been around those things know that they're really noisy. You can't touch the thing without it making a bunch of racket. Well, we heard it hit that gate, and you could hear it clearly. And when it did, the folks that ran our sawmill, they had 7 big old rough coonhounds, hunting dogs, and they were plot hounds and a couple of catahoulas and black and tans, and these were rough old, they were gamey dogs. They weren't scared of anything, and they all came roaring off the porch and out from under the porch and everything, go tearing off over there, and you could hear them. And they lit in after this thing. And oh my God, it was an unbelievable racket. And right at first, it sounded like the dogs were going to just eat this thing alive. And then all of a sudden, you started hearing the dogs screaming and arr, 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 and you could tell the dogs were being torn up and all. And then it just got quieter, and it started getting quieter. We could tell that some of the dogs were getting killed. And about that time, I started hearing rifle shots, and my grandfather came running out of the house with his 30-30 and started shooting in the air, shooting out through the treetops. He did this thing. He knew better than to try to shoot one, but he was shooting to scare it off. Well, at that instant, my dad came flying out of the house with a Brown automatic 5 shotgun loaded up with buckshot and a big flashlight, jumped in the truck and hauled ass over there. And by the time Daddy got over there, things had gotten quiet, and we could still hear a couple of dogs crying, and I clearly heard that he had to shoot one to put it out of its misery. And but we went over there the next morning, and there was just an unbelievable slaughter. There were dog parts everywhere. I mean, heads, legs, body torsos, bodies twisted in half, the backbones broken, dogs with their heads twisted around backwards, necks broken, slung all over a fairly large area, area that probably 100 yards across and 50 yards in every direction. And it was unbelievable. The thing had killed outright 5 of the 7 dogs, and my dad had to put one out of its misery, and the one that was left was injured, but it lived. And also during the night, the folks that ran our sawmill packed up and left, never to return. They threw everything they could into their car and their truck and got the hell out of Dodge. And my dad couldn't get them to come back for love nor money. I mean, they still would come in and run the sawmill, but they would no longer live on the farm. And and come dark, they were gone. I mean, they were out of there. In fact, when it would start getting dusky dark, they'd haul butt. But I can remember, asking, what was that name? What did that? And it's just that, is that one of those old catamounts, and I asked him, what was a catamount? I asked my grandfather first, what is a catamount? He said, well, I don't really know, but it's sort of like a cross between a big bear and a great big huge gorilla. And when you think about it, for 1957, 1958 time frame, that's pretty good description.
Yeah.
And, the Yeti's never been heard of at that time. At this point, abominable snowman hadn't been heard of in our part of the country, and we'd never heard of Sasquatch or anything like that. That word never even been mentioned there. And and I asked my dad, I couldn't really understand, what my grandfather was trying to tell me. So I asked my daddy, Daddy, what's Catamountain? And he said, well, it's sort of like maybe a big gorilla, and maybe with some bear mixed in it, with maybe some kind of cougar or something mixed in it, because it can, they can go right up a tree. And that didn't really tell me much, but it was in line with what my grandfather had said. And then we'd still hear them and all, and I was still curious about them. And what was weird is 2 or 3 months before my grandfather died, he got me in his old truck, and he never called me by my name. He'd just call me boy. He said, "Get the truck, boy. We're going to go back here on the back of the farm." And he goes driving me over out east of their house. And to this day, there's a big ridge back there, and it's not a real steep ridge or anything, because we farm it. We've had pasture on it for years. In fact, right now this year it was planted in corn, and but we've grown soybeans, cotton, corn, millet. We've had it in high grade pasture, and all that is just part of the tillable acreage of our farm. But right up on top of this ridge, there's this one big single solitary oak tree. And if anybody knows much about trees that grow out in the open like that, with no other trees around them to shade them, they grow with big limbs all the way to the ground. And that's the way this big oak was. And it had big limbs all the way to the ground. So we go riding back there, and he pulls up in front of this tree. "You see that tree, boy?" "Yes, sir." He says, "Those catamounts sit up in that tree and watch us. And every time I come back over here, they jump down, they run off down in that holler." And he points off down into a hollow there, sort of to the northwest of where we were sitting, that goes down towards the river. And this is the Tennessee River. And he says, and I'm like, okay, 3 years old, so what am I going to say, And then he says, "Boy, I don't want to hear about you coming over here and climbing around on this tree." He said, "You don't need to be back over here messing around here by yourself." And he said, "And if I ever hear you bringing your little sister over here, I'll tear your rear end up." And I remember, even at that age, I'm thinking, that's a crazy thing to say. And my little sister was an infant. I mean, she was only like 6 months old or so at this time, if that old. I mean, she's just a little infant. And I'm thinking, at 3 years old, I had never even thought about climbing a tree. That was one thing. And certainly I had not ever thought about taking my little sister anywhere, with her. She wasn't even crawling at that time. And it was weird. I think he knew he was dying, because a couple of months later he was dead. He was gone. And I think he was just trying to instill something in me before he died. And then, so he passed away, and about a year or so later, I'm laying in the bed one night, and it was pretty close to this time of year, maybe a little bit earlier, but it was still hot enough at night that we would have the windows open, or still hot enough that at night we would have the windows open and have the attic fan going. By that time, I had graduated up, and I had bunk beds in my room, which was great because we had those old crank-out casement windows in our house, and they were up off the floor a pretty good ways, and so those bunk beds put me up there really in line with those windows, so the cool air would come right across the bed. And of course, we had, if anybody knows about those old casement windows, the screens are on the inside, and it had a couple little clips that you could unclip and then raise the screen up and look out, stick your head out the window if you want to, or you could pull the screen plumb out. But I'm laying there in the bed, and I hear gravel crunching outside. And my dad had we didn't have gutters on our house, and when it rains hard in Alabama, and we just got that old just red clay dirt, and the rain coming off the house when you got no gutters, it cuts down through the grass, and it gets into that red dirt, and it splatters that old red mud all over the side of the house. Well, Mom and Dad didn't like that, so Dad had spread about of a gravel from the foundation of the house out from the house probably 4 feet or so, and so there was this border of gravel all the way around the house, and it's still there today. And I heard somebody out there walking on that gravel coming around the side of the house up under the eaves, and I could hear gravel crunching. Well, I thought it was my friend that lived over there, the caretaker of the farm. I thought it was his son. And of course, that was ridiculous. He wouldn't be out there by himself at that hour of the night. But I expected to see my friend Danny standing there, and I didn't. And so I looked to my right, and there's nobody. I looked to my left, and there's one of these damn boogers standing there. But he had his back up to the wall, and I'm guessing it was a he. And I didn't see anything indicating that it was female. But it had his back up to the wall, and I clearly remember it had the palm of its right hand against the side of the house. And it had its head turned looking at me. And I looked at it, and my eyes got big. Oh, my bedroom was on the south side of the house, and the moon was up good. And the moonlight it was actually a quarter moon, so the moon was over past it was over in the southwest, and the moon was shining, and it was reflecting in its eyes. Its eyes were reflecting yellow, not red, but yellow. And this thing had reddish hair, and just real pretty auburn-colored hair. And I realize now, but the ones out on our farm are really clean, and they look like every one of them I've seen, it looks like they've just come from the beauty shop or just had a shampoo or something. But that moonlight glinting in that hair, and mind you, this is the first one I've ever seen, and it looked like there was blood in its hair. And the descriptions that my dad, and my grandfather give me of a bear and a gorilla, those are both black. And so to see this red thing standing there in the moonlight glinting off of its hair, I just instantly thought it was blood. And I come flying off the bunk bed, go running into my parents' room. Mama, Daddy, there's a yellow-eyed bug-headed monster outside my window. And my dad never hesitated. He came flying out of the bed in his boxer shorts, and he had his slippers. He kept his slippers sitting there beside the bed, and he jumped in those slippers just like he was a fireman or something. He grabs that Browning shotgun out from behind the door, and grabs his head, this big old, about a 4 or 6 D-cell ever-ready, big old chrome ever-ready flashlight that I always sit on the bedside table. he grabbed that flashlight in one hand and a shotgun in the other, and he goes hauling ass out the damn door with in his boxer shorts and slippers. And he told my mama, he said, get the kids and get in the bathroom. Well, Mama got me, told me to go get in the bathroom, and she went and got my little sister out of the crib. And we go in the bathroom, and she locks the door. And the bathroom was a safe place because there wasn't a window in there. And so we go in there, and we get all the way up against the back wall of the thing. Oh, and Mama's got her pistol, got her 38 in her hand. And we sit down on the floor. She sat us down on the floor, and then she sat down in front of us, and she had that pistol propped up across her knees, pointed at the bathroom door. And my dad says he's gone about, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes or so, some amount of time, and we hear the door close. And I don't know if it was the front door or the back door, and I don't remember. And he hollered to my mom. He said, "Hey, it's me! Don't shoot!" She said, "Okay." And he comes up here and he says, he says to her, he said, "Okay, unlock the door." He said, "I'm out here in the hallway. Don't shoot me." And she, "I'm not." She unlocked the door, and the first thing she said, "Did you see it?" And he says, "No, but I heard it beating feet up towards the shack." And both my grandfathers built houses then, and they had this old wooden shack that they would set onto a lowboy trailer and take it out on a construction site and pull it off and set it up out there, and it would be their office while they were working on the house or something. And they kept that shack sitting up there in the northeast corner of that 40-acre field that we lived in the middle of. And what's interesting is that is still a travel route to this day. But that was the first time I saw one, and I was 4 years old. But so my grandmother and my great-grandmother and stuff, they talked about them like they were just as normal as squirrels and rabbits. And so I grew up hearing about them my whole life. And so I got really interested in them back in the 70s, and my friend, I was starting to live out there on the farm. We had moved into town by then, and my grandparents had all passed away, and the old farmhouse was still sitting out there. Well, I had fixed that thing up when I was in college, and whenever I was home, I'd live out there. Well, my buddy Jim Hart, otherwise known as Bubba Gump, online in the Bigfoot community, but Jim and I would, he was really interested in them too, and so we started hanging around out there at night and going around looking for them. And we knew they were out there. We'd hear them occasionally and stuff, and we'd hear about them, other neighbors and stuff seeing them. And but we actually started researching and trying to look for them, try to find them and stuff like that back in the mid 70s. So and interesting thing, I started hearing so many stories and stuff around in the area that I decided I needed to start writing this stuff down. And the very, very first sighting report that I ever wrote down was in 1978, and it was from a family that I went to school with their kids, and the oldest son.
There's some sort of noise going on there. There you go.
Oh man! Hold on. Let me turn this off. Sorry. It's a water heater coming on.
All right.
Sorry.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, you'll have to edit that out. But anyway, this family that lived about 3 or 4 miles east of me, And this is after I'm out of college, and I'm working at the local utility company in the electrical engineering department. And we're at lunch, taking a lunch break one day, and the oldest son of this family that lived out there, he starts telling me this story, and he'd asked me, where y'all working this afternoon? Well, we were surveying in and engineering a new power line out in that area. They were building some roads out there going out to the waterfront, and so we were laying all the power lines and surveying them in the right of ways, and then doing the engineering work on them. And I told him what we were doing, and we were having to drive right past their house, and he said, well, watch out for that old goat man. And I said, what you mean? He said, oh yeah, that thing scared us half to death here a couple of nights ago. And so he tells me the story. And he said they'd had supper. Their dad worked second shift at the big Reynolds Metals plant that was there in the Muscle Shoals area. Had a big, huge, I think at one time it was the largest aluminum plant in the world at one time. But anyway, his dad worked there on second shift. And so they'd eaten supper, and it was him and his mom and his younger brother, who was he was also in between my sister and my middle brother in school. So the older brother had already finished his homework, and he was in there watching TV. So the mother was washing the dishes, and the kitchen window faced east, and it's real pretty out there. It had a good view of it, and she was sitting there washing dishes and stuff, and the younger brother was doing his homework at the kitchen table. And so she noticed all of a sudden that that she wasn't seeing the moon anymore. She thought, well, gosh, are some clouds coming in? And so she leaned up to look out the kitchen window to see if she could see any clouds. And as she leaned up to the glass, this creature leaned in to the window from the outside. And it ended up their noses were probably only, half inch or so apart. And it absolutely scared her half to death. And she starts yelling, ah, ah. It scared her so bad she couldn't just scream. She was doing this little kind of noise. And she was stumbling backwards, and she had her hands up over her mouth. And the younger son looked around like, what the hell's going on, And he looks there, and he sees the thing looking in the window at him. And he said the thing was actually turning its head, looking around in the kitchen through the window. And he hollered and jumped up from the table so fast he turned the dinner table over. And, of course, that made a huge racket. Well, the older brother hears all this and comes running into there from the living room or the den, wherever the TV was that he was watching, and he sees the thing. Well, they'd had enough activity out there that their father had wired up big floodlights on every corner of the house, and he'd wired up switches, 4 or 5 switches around the house where you could flip any one of these switches and all of them would turn on. He'd installed some relays and stuff like that up in the attic. And he was a good electrician. And so one of those switches was right there next to the kitchen door coming out of the hallway. And so he had enough presence of mind. He flipped that switch on. It just lit up everything out in the yard, all the way around the house like daylight. And the thing, when he flipped all those lights on, it lit it up good. It lit up the booger really well. And it jerked his head back, and it whirled around a whole mess. And he went running down the hallway and flung open the front door and saw it ran across their front yard to the southeast, and then it started running down the street. It ran down the street, and then it ran off into some woods that were further down the street from their house, and down a hill. You went off down a hill going towards the river, and it ran off. He saw it dart over into the woods. And anyway, so I wanted to get the report. So I asked if I could come out and write all this down and talk to, him and his mom and his little brother. So I did, and I made a point. I wanted to talk to each one of them individually, and they told the story just like pretty much just like what he had told me at work. And when I was asking what it looked like and everything, well, it didn't really jive with what I had seen. But I thought, well, it's, I guess they just saw it. It was such a short encounter that maybe they didn't see it real good. And so I just thought it was just regular Bigfoot. And interesting thing was, just a very short time later, this was getting close to this was dove season opened up, or it had just opened, and I had been invited on a dove hunt, and there was a big hunting club out there that had land south of where these folks lived, where they would have dove shoots, and I went to the dove shoot out there, and like I said, as a guest, and then we had a big feed up at their clubhouse, which was through the woods, cross country, was not even a half a mile from this family's house that had this encounter just a couple of weeks before. And somehow I got to talking to the cook, and he got to telling me about this thing that was this haint, as he called it, or booger, this thing that would come in and would rummage through their dumpster. Or actually, they didn't have dumpsters back then. He had just a bunch of big old garbage barrels back there, and he would come rummage through those barrels and get would eat a lot of dove and quail, and they'd have fish fries. It was always, whenever they'd have some kind of a feed out there, it would always come in and rummage through the garbage barrels. And so I caught him when he was done with his cleaning up and everything, and I took a report from him, wrote it all down, and he described the thing the same way as the other family that I had interviewed described it. And again, it didn't jive with my description of a Bigfoot, and there were several distinct details that were really different than what I had seen. But I just sort of blew it off at the time. So, over the years, as I started, taking more reports and talking to more people and stuff, I started figuring out that there were more than one kind of Bigfoot. And that there wasn't just the kind that we had on our farm, and that there was another kind that was lighter weight and didn't get as tall. The one on our farm, the big male, he was about 10 feet tall, and I actually saw him for the first time in 1980, October of 1980, and I saw him up closer than I wanted to see him, and I got him marked really, really well against the side of our stable, and against a tree limb on a big old tree that we had a big limb on it that we used to pull engines with and stuff like that. And I knew exactly how far it was from the ground up to the bottom of that limb. And also, we had I caught him against the eave of as he walked around the corner of our stable building, and we had a drip rail in the siding right there, even with the bottom of the gable, and that thing was exactly 10 feet off the ground there on the south side of the stable. And I saw him up against it, and as he was walking along, his head was bobbing up and down right along that, even with that drip edge. So I knew he was 10 feet tall. And plus I measured just to be sure against that tree that he passed under, his big tree limb. And he was rather upset when during this episode, because I had moved the sweet feed troughs and the lick wheels, which a lick wheel is it's a big metal tank, holds about, I don't know, maybe 40, 50 gallons ours would hold about 40, 50 gallons, probably about 50, 55 gallons of a molasses or syrup compound that had a bunch of minerals and stuff mixed in it, and which were good for the cattle. And there was a wheel that turned. There was a slot in the top of it, and a wheel mounted there. That the bottom of the wheel reached down to the bottom of the tank, and the cattle would lick it, and it would turn and lift up more of the molasses and stuff. But we had a couple of those, and we had several sweet feed troughs, and I had moved those from the west side of the farm over to the east side of the farm because we moved our cattle. This thing was PO'd because its little extra food supply and sweet supply had been moved, and it was raising hell. And that was in October of 1980. But as more people over wider and wider areas, I knew about the kinds that were like in the Patterson-Gimlin film, what we call the patty type. That the males are about 10 feet tall and the females around 8 feet, plus or minus, and very hugely built. But I also had learned about and found the tracks of these lighter weight ones. They were still horrendously strong and huge big barrel chests, but they weren't as wide across the shoulders, and they were only like maybe 8.5 feet tall. The males, and the females would only be, maybe 6.5, 7.5 feet tall, something like that, max. And so I had gotten to the point that I was asking when I would talk to people, what did it look like? Was it like this kind or like this kind? And then I was still hearing about these other things that people would describe that had they looked like that their legs looked like dogs' legs or goats' legs, like if you stood them up on their back legs, or like goats when they stand up on their back legs, going to butt heads with another billy goat. That their legs looked like goat legs or like dog legs. And I'm just thinking, what is this? And I kept hearing it often enough that I began to believe that this wasn't just misidentified stuff. It was that there was something else out there that wasn't Bigfoot. And they would talk about that. Nobody talking about Bigfoot. I hardly ever had anybody mention the ears. But with these other things, people would often mention that they had pointed ears, and I would ask them about the ears. I would ask them, well, are the ears like you're talking about like a Labrador Retriever or something? No. More like a Doberman Pinscher's ears, but a little bit more hairy, something almost like a wolf's ears or something. And 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 some people say it had a snout. It had a snout on it, just like a wolf or something. And some people would say that they were werewolves, and I'm like, yeah, that's a bunch of hooey. And then, in the meantime, I had gone to work for the government in 1980, and had moved up to after the incident that happened in October. It scared my wife so badly. We'd only been married about 6 months, or a little less than 6 months, and she would not stay on that farm another night. And so by the next weekend, we had moved lock, stock, and barrel to Huntsville, Alabama, from over out east of Muscle Shoals. So let's fast forward to 1984. We were getting ready for the first Department of Defense mission of the space shuttle, and I was one of the electrical engineers that worked on the space shuttle for NASA, and we were getting ready for just a absolutely horrendous amount of data to be downloaded during the flight, from the shuttle to the ground. So they built a huge new ground station there at Redstone. We were having built and then installing all kind of recording equipment and just tremendous amount of stuff. There was a lot of the equipment being built by a contractor down in South Alabama, down between outside of Union Springs, Alabama, and there weren't any motels in Union Springs, so we were all staying out at Troy, Alabama. And a lot of the workforce that worked out there at this facility commuted back and forth. They're from Troy. And so I started to work one morning about, we started at 7 a.m. and I always had a kickoff meeting with the folks. And there were these two ladies that rode to work together. And I noticed when they came in, they were upset and they were crying. And I'm thinking, gosh, what's going on with them? And we had our meeting and everything, and they just, you could tell they weren't focused on the meeting. They were just something bad had happened. And so, and by the way, nobody knew about my Bigfoot research or my interest in Bigfoot or anything like that. No, none of them knew. And so and this is an ultra high priority project, and it was top secret and everything. And these are very, very skilled workers and very highly trained ladies, and I needed them to be focused and at 100%, for working on this equipment, because it's very, very technical equipment that we were working on. So once we got done with our kickoff meeting, everybody started out to work. Now I asked those ladies to say, hey, come on over here, come in my office. Went in the office. I said, what's going on? What's the matter? Well, they didn't want to talk about it. And so I just shut the office door and I said, ladies, I said, let's talk about it. I said, what's got you guys so upset? I mean, do you need to go home, or, I need you focused, on the job. Anything that's affecting your work, I need to know about it. Are you sick? No, we're not sick. What's going on? Well, you wouldn't believe us if we told you. I said, you'd be surprised what I'd believe. And, well, we saw something today on the way to work. and And I'm like, oh, really? And the interesting thing, I had already, in my short time there staying at Troy, I had already heard several Bigfoot reports in that area. I had even heard some where they were coming into town raiding dumpsters around some restaurants and fast food joints. And there was a country club being built out on the southwest side of town, and the people out there working construction up the country club on the golf course had several sightings along a creek that flowed through there. So I knew there were boogers. I said, I just flat asked them. I said, "Did y'all see a Bigfoot?" "No, we wish we had." I said, "Really?" And I said, "Well, I've been researching Bigfoot for years, and I said I've heard all kind of stories, so you can tell me." Well, they sort of looked at me, and so I had one of my ledgers, one of my log books out in my car. I said, "Just wait right here." So I just went out to my car and got it, brought it in, showed it to them, and I showed them, and I said, "Look," I said, "here's where I take my reports." I said, "I talk to people all the time." And I showed them a couple of people I thought they would know that they're in Troy, and they recognized one of them. And I said, "So you can tell me what you saw and what happened." And they says, "Well, it wasn't a Bigfoot." I'm thinking, oh boy, here we go. So, and I said, "Well, what was it?" They said, one of the ladies just broke down and started sobbing. I mean, just her whole body shaking. She's crying. The other lady said, "It was a huge werewolf." And I said, "Oh, really?" So they described it to me, and I talked to one of the ladies, and I talked to the other lady, and they just described this thing. And the thing that got me, that both of them said, was how the evil that they felt from the thing. They were going around the road. They were going up U.S. Highway 29, going from Troy to Union Springs. They were a few miles out of town, and at that point, the highway sort of parallels a creek bottom. The creek is off on the right-hand side of the road, and there is a pretty good-sized hill on the left-hand side of the road. And they had come around a long left-hand curve that went around sort of the southeast side of this hill, and had come to a very short little straightaway, and the road started curving around to the right and towards the east. And there's a curve sign there in the highway. And they said as they were approaching this curve sign, and this was at about 6:15 in the morning, as they were approaching this curve sign, this thing came walking up the side of up the bank out of the creek bottom, up onto the shoulder of the road right beside this curve sign. And it stopped, and it turned, and it looked at them, and it made eye contact with them. And the lady sitting and the lady driving, she stomped on the brakes. That was her reaction. She stomped on the brakes, and she couldn't get stopped in time, and she's slowing down, and the way she was, if she'd have kept stopping at that rate, the thing would have been right there beside the car, and right there by the passenger door, or right by the passenger side fender. And the lady in the passenger side, she said that thing was looking her right in the eyes, and her exact words were, "I could feel it trying to suck my soul out of my body." That was her exact words. I've never forgotten that. And the other lady said that thing was absolutely pure evil. She said it exuded pure evil. And she said the lady sitting on the passenger side started screaming, "Go, go, 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 go!" And so the lady just floorboarded it and shot past the thing. And she said, as they went past it, it was just had its eyes just drilling into that lady on the passenger side. And she said that she could feel it trying to pull her soul out of her body. And
wow.
now, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, that's terrifying. And like you said, these ladies, because I've heard this. You and I have spoken for, a couple hours the other day. And like you said, these ladies were not your average. They were very educated women. And
very, very educated women. And very educated women. I mean, these ladies could work. Well, hell, they were subcontracting for NASA.
Right.
And they had top secret they had top secret clearances. And these were very, very highly trained, very skilled, very intelligent ladies. And so I told him, I said, I have heard descriptions of the creature you're talking about. I said, I've heard it. I said, I've been hearing it for years off and on. I said, and that's when, and I asked them, and they had just terrifically detailed descriptions of it, of its legs, its shoulders, how its posture was, its what its face looked like, and its head. They said it looked like it had just a gigantic wolf's head, but that the snout was a little thicker than a wolf's. That the nose wasn't quite as pointed as a wolf's, but but they could clearly see its fangs. They said they could see its upper and lower fangs, and canine teeth, and they said it had like wolf's ears, or like maybe almost like German Shepherd ears or something. And they said its ears were laid back, like it was pissed or something at them. And they said it had huge shoulders, and the upper body, it said it had a narrow waist, but it said it had humongous upper body, but real barrel chested, not wide like a patty type Bigfoot, and but the upper body was just massive, just big barrel chested, and they said it had hands on it. They could see. They both saw its hands, and they said one of the ladies said that actually put one of his hands out, and they thought that it touched or got a hold of the curve sign, the post of the curve sign. And I asked them if they would show me that evening, if they would show me, where this happened. And they were really reluctant. I said, look, I've got a gun. I said, we can go back there, and if you'll just show me where this happened and where you saw it, show me the sign, and then you can go on. So they agreed, and so we took off just as quickly as we could and hauled butt down there before it got dark. And we got there, and I got them to. At this time I had gotten the habit of, I had a stick of bamboo with a paper plate stapled to it, and the stick of bamboo was about 5-6 feet long. And when I would be trying to get people to help me estimate how tall the things were, I'd get behind whatever cover, I'd get wherever the thing was, the Bigfoot or whatever that they were seeing, and I would hold that thing up. I'd get them to tell me to stop when the paper plate was up about where its head was. So I did that with them, and they both stopped me at the same place. And I figured this thing was about 9 feet tall, but it was not standing straight up. It was sort of crouched, but it was, its head was, the top of his head was about 9 feet. And they had it marked pretty good on the curve side. And so they wanted out of there because it was getting dusky. And so I told them, go ahead. And they took off out of there. So I got to looking on the side of the road. Oh, the lady that was driving noted that when she stomped on the gas and shot past the thing, she looked up the rearview mirror and she saw it run across the road and up the bank on the other side. And so I looked and I found sort of a scratch or whatever, or some disturbed gravel right there. Or maybe it kicked off, taken off across the road. But when I got to the other side of the road, on the southbound shoulder of the road, I found very clearly where it had kicked off, and I found a pretty clear imprint of the pad of its feet and its toes with claw marks, about 6.5 feet up the bank of that embankment. And this wasn't a rock embankment. This was just a cut dirt embankment, and like you see down south, a lot of the cuts and stuff where they've cut into the side of the hills to make roads, they're not rock. It's just dirt. And but it was a very clear one clear paw mark, about 6.5 feet up, and when I tried to pull a tape measure on it as best as I could, from where it kicked off of the shoulder of the road to where the foot was, linear distance from one to the other was about, I don't know, 15, 16 feet, something like that. The next one was just below the crest of the bank, which the crest of the bank was about 13 feet above the roadway. And the next one was just below the crest of the bank, and about a little over 12 feet up from the bottom of the bank. And then I found one over the crest of the bank, about another 10 feet or so. And then it was in the woods, and I couldn't find anything much definite after that. But anyway, I get back to seeing the tracks. That's the first time I had ever seen physical evidence. And by this time, I had seen enough Bigfoot tracks on my farm. The big alpha on our farm throws a 22-inch track. And I had seen them, and I had seen a lot of 15 to 17, 18-inch tracks, and very few of them that were above 20 inches. But I had never seen one of these tracks that looked like sort of like a gigantic dog. They were quite right for just a big dog track. They were wider across the ball of the foot, but all I saw was just the ball of the foot, and then the toes, and then claw marks. Now, people ask me, and I have seen other Dogman tracks. I've seen them with 5 toes, I've seen them with 4 toes, and I've seen them with 3 toes. But I have not seen enough of them to know what the norm is. So, but I've seen them with 3, 4, and 5 toes, and I have heard of them with 6 toes. I have not personally seen a 6-toed track, right. Dogman track. But now, at this point, so once I had seen that track, and they were good enough and clear enough for me, and I have seen Bigfoot tracks going up embankments. They're way different, and I knew then that I was dealing with something else. And then everything fell in place. That all these people that had been describing these other creatures as dogmen, werewolves, and goat men, and just some kind of weird things, had a snout on them and all. I realized that there was something else out there, and that's when I started coming up with this numbering plan. And originally I called the big patty type, which was the first ones that I ever saw. And it looked like the ones in the Patterson-Gimlin film. call them the type 1s. And these other ones that people call them swamp apes and stuff like that, and they're somewhat smaller, I call them type 2s. And these werewolf-looking ones, I was calling them type 3s. And like I said, if you want to see a good, of course, the one in the Patterson-Gimlin film, that's a perfect female type 1. And there are pictures and artwork and stuff out there of type 1 males. And if you want to see a really good picture of a type 2, get online and search for the book Them and Us. Them and Us. And look at what the guy that wrote that book, look at his rendition of what a Neanderthal really looked like. The Neanderthal pictures that we've been shown in school, that we were taught in school, is not what this guy believes that they look like. But look at his rendition of a Neanderthal and lose the spear and lose the vertical slit pupils and give it a little bit more of a human type nose, and you've got pretty much a type 2 Bigfoot. Look at the barrel chest and all that.
Yeah, when you told me about that, I looked it up when you and I were talking that night, and it blew my mind, because what we had been taught was the Neanderthal resembles I was like blown away. I don't know if you remember, but it was really an enlightening moment going, wow, this actually fits, a lot better into the whole thing. So sorry to cut you off on that. I just needed to.
No, you didn't cut me off at all. So I rocked along there, and I went back, started going back through all my journals and my reports and everything. And as I start marking them, type 1, type 2, type 3, type 1, type 2, type 3, trying to classify them. Okay. And then in the late 90s, I started researching down in East Texas. And it didn't take me long and I got involved with some guys down in West. And I started seeing, I was used to seeing 3-toed tracks, but I started seeing, now one of the things that I learned is that, I'll go back. Don't let me forget to talk about the feet.
Okay.
All right. I started seeing, it's common to see 3-toed Bigfoot tracks. And I believe that's just I believe that there's probably 5 toes there in most cases, but that the toes are webbed together. And that is a defect that you see in humans. Sometimes, and it's not a rare defect for hands and fingers and toes to be webbed together in humans. And it's not as common now as it used to be, but that's also an effect that can happen due to inbreeding, generations of inbreeding. And one of the things that I believe is that, and there's pretty good evidence for it, is that when the white man brought in their European diseases, smallpox, measles, chickenpox, and stuff like that, and the Native Americans did not have resistance to that, it just started wiping them out. And there was even some low-down scumbags that actually purposely infected Native American tribes with these European diseases to wipe them out. They gave them blankets that infected people had used and such as that. But not only did that wipe out millions of Native Americans, but I believe it also wiped out millions of Sasquatch, Bigfoot.
Yeah.
And I believe that is what has caused some of the weirdities that we see in the normal Bigfoot population. It was a result of generations of inbreeding that was caused by the bulk of the population being wiped out back in the 1600s, 1700s, and early 1800s, and that there were just small little breeding populations left, and they ended up being inbred in many cases. So I think that's why we see what accounts for a lot of these three-toed tracks. Well, down in Texas, I started seeing tracks, regular-looking Bigfoot tracks, with claws on the toes, it looked like. You and I, humans, have what's called plantigrade feet. In other words, when we're standing up, standing there, our heels are on the ground. When we walk, our heels hit the ground. Bigfoot are the same way. They have plantigrade feet. When they're standing up, their heels are on the ground. When they walk, their heels are on the ground. Their heels hit the ground. Now, when they start moving quadrupedally and bend over, their heels come up. But you know when that's going on because you can find the knuckle prints that indicate that they're doing that. They also, because they have a mid-tarsal break in their feet, they can actually hide or disguise their tracks to look like very similar to, if the ground is soft enough, it looks like that cattle or horses have come through an area, because all you'll find is little round pug marks, because they can actually scrunch up their toes almost like we can our fist, and so that they don't leave toe prints, and they leave these pug marks. So you researchers that are actually out there in the field, if you're in an area where you know that Bigfoot have been traveling through and you cannot find any tracks, but you're like down in a ditch or along a creek bank or something, it looks like that somebody's been leading ponies or cattle through there, and you see these little round, I call them pug marks, or little round prints in the dirt, and they're indistinct. You can't see a clear hoof print or something like that. That is often what Bigfoot will leave behind when they're traveling quadrupedally, and they have their fists doubled up and they have their toes scrunched up, because they can do things with their feet that we cannot. And I have found heavily used travel routes that I actually physically observed the Bigfoot moving through there quadrupedally, and go back down there thinking I'm going to get some really good tracks and everything, and that's what I found. I thought, well, what the hell? And I finally figured it out. I figured that that's what they were doing. And that was now, I haven't seen that very many times, but I physically observed them down in Mississippi one time, coming out of a big tract of pine forest and dropping off down into a creek. And they followed this creek, meandered across a quarter section of land, and they followed that creek over into the tract of woods on the other side of this quarter section of land. A quarter section is 160 acres in a square, and it's a half a mile on the side. So they followed this creek that meandered across this 160 acre bean field, and they didn't leave a single track in it. All they left was these little, what I call pug marks.
Wow.
And it was a whole troop. We were able to count them because of their communication, their little noises they made as they kept track of where they were. It was a whole family unit.
How many about would you say would be in that particular family?
In that particular family, there was about 8 that were making noise.
Okay. All right.
And
Really quick, I did talk to you, and I usually have 45 minutes of record time. Tonight I was able to figure out how to do up to 2 hours. We're coming up about on 100 minutes. So we got about 20 minutes left. I know you did say that you'd be willing to come back on the show and share some more. Can I just ask a couple of questions?
Sure. Yeah.
What now? One thing that really interested me, and you kind of shocked me when you said yes, you've heard, is when I said, what would happen if a Sasquatch met up with a Dogman? And you said a Dogman would absolutely, tear a Sasquatch apart.
Right.
Has there been any accounts that you know of that has happened?
Well, I have heard from some folks that live up there in the area around Land Between the Lakes. A guy started telling me this probably 10 years ago, that the Dogman says is a commercial fisherman, and he's always out, and all weather, and sometimes all times of the day, different times of the day when the catfish are running. And I sort of blew him off. Some of the things he told me, I didn't, I took note of them and everything, and I wrote it down, but often I'll make little notes in there, improbable or doubt it, or this need to investigate this more. But I went up there to his house, and let me tell you what, he does not live there at LBL. His family was one of the families that were bought out and had to move out of Land Between the Lakes. He lives up on the Ohio River now, sort of north and a little east of LBL. And that's definitely a boogery place where he lives. I mean, a seriously boogery place. And he said some things that he wouldn't. Not everybody would know what some things he told me, and that made me realize that guy's shooting me straight. And then he told me about a day that he and his uncle or somebody were down fishing around the canal that separates the north end of Land Between the Lakes from the what's it called? Not Grand Island, Grand Rivers, the little town of Grand Rivers. And they were fishing along the Lake Barkley end of the canal, and he saw this Dogman over there on the north side of the canal, not on the LBL side, but on the Grand River side, along the bank. And it was doing something that definitely Dogmen do that Bigfoot do not do. And I have heard several accounts of, I have heard other accounts of what they do. Now, this is something that I'm not going to reveal it because it's something that I use to help judge where somebody's telling me the truth or not. And this guy described it perfectly. So I knew he was telling the truth. So I keep in contact with him, and he's telling me, and I have heard it from other people as well that spend a lot of time in that area, that the Dogmen are moving into that area, and that the Bigfoot are moving out, and that the Dogmen will take over an area, and that the Bigfoot are scared of them. Now, that leads me to another story. I've done a lot of research up and down the Des Moines River up in Iowa. we've had a similar situation occur up there, where I have found that. Oh, back to the feet, real quick.
Yeah.
A normal type 1 or type 2 Bigfoot has plantigrade feet. Dogmen, the canid type dogmen, have what is called digitigrade feet. In other words, when they're standing up, their heel is not on the ground. And it's called the hock, like on a dog. That's the dog. That is a dog's heel. And they walk on the balls of their feet. So, and when they're standing up and when they're walking, their heel does not touch the ground. They walk on their toes. That's how come they call it digitigrade. And it's equivalent of the ball of the pad that a dog had, the pad mark that a dog leaves in his track right behind his toes. That is the ball of his foot.
Okay.
And so that's what you get from a dog man is you get the pad, and it's not shaped just like a dog, like a dog print that you're thinking of, that you think you're going to. And it's easily distinguished from a bear. The claws are totally different, but they have digitigrade feet, whereas normal type 1 and type 2 Bigfoot have plantigrade feet. In other words, their heel hits the ground every step they take when they're walking upright. Now, I started finding down in Texas plantigrade feet with clawed toes. And I ran into some folks that lived in an area down there right along the Texas-Louisiana border that got to talking about the snouted ones or the baboon-headed ones. And I'm thinking, what in the crap is all this? And I started asking about the werewolves and all that. No, it's not a werewolf. This is different. This has a body like a Bigfoot. We got a Bigfoot body, but it's got claws on his toes and claws on his hands, and it's got a baboon-looking head and big old canines, big fangs. I'm like, crap. And then the damn picture came out of the Beast of Seven Shoots.
Mm-hmm.
You can look it up online, the Beast of Seven Shoots. And it Shoots is spelled Chutes. And Seven Shoots is a park in Quebec, Canada. A guy was taking a picture of the waterfalls there, and he was looking at the pictures later, and he noticed this thing standing there looking at him. And it is one of these snouted Bigfoots with the baboon-looking head. So now I had to change my numbering system. That is what I call a type 3, and the canid dogmen, the werewolf type dogmen, I classify them as a type 4 now. So one is type 1 is a patty, type 2 is a Neanderthal type, type 3 is the Beast of Seven Shoots type 4 is the canid werewolf Beast of Land Between the Lakes type.
Okay.
And so that's my numbering system. Now, folks have added to it. Some people say type 5 is the little people. Well, I've never seen a little people, and I've never, other than my friend Doug, and and I don't research them. I don't look for them. I've only heard myself personally one report of them. And however, a few years ago there was an expedition up in either Minnesota or Michigan, and a lady got an absolutely fantastic picture of one. And so I've done everything I can to debunk that picture, and it's
Could it be a juvenile? Could it be a juvenile Sasquatch?
I don't know. This thing's got a little decoration, a little headband on his head made out of leaves or something. Yeah. Oh yeah. It's crazy. I'll see if I can get permission to share it.
So it's almost like
it's not my picture, but
it's almost like an evolved So it's more evolved along the lines to where, okay, that's neat.
Yeah, but I don't, like I said, I don't do that. So I was questioning it, and somebody gave me that picture, and I know the lady who it came from. So she's reliable. So I'm not gonna. So I can't dispute it. So anyway, I have since found out that the ones that are moving in up there and displacing some Bigfoot along the Des Moines River are the Type 3s. And I have taken a number of reports of the Type 3s out in Oklahoma. And there's quite a few of them down in parts of East Texas and western Louisiana. So they are not near as common, as they're the least common of the 4 types. The Type 4 canid types seem to be much more widespread, but the canids are in small little groups, and I've never heard of anything more than 4 or 5 in a family unit, whereas these Type 3s seem to be in larger groups. It's common to hear of 18 to 25 in a group.
Wow.
It's
and they're aggressive, right? They're more aggressive than the Type 4, or no?
Well, no, I don't know. People that have had close encounters with them say that they are evil, but the Type 4s are supposedly the most evil.
Right.
But they are evil, and they are. But they're not just indiscriminate, bloodthirsty killers. I personally know a lady who's had several encounters with them, but it got bad enough that she moved off and left her house. So she just abandoned her house, and she made story. Right. But I know we're probably right up against the end of our time.
Yeah, we've got about 9 minutes left. How about we end tonight? I'm looking forward to, like I said to the audience, I had almost a 3-hour conversation with you, and I was blown away. And I feel honored just to be able to speak with you and have you on the show. Looking forward to having you come back. Is there anything that you could possibly share with the not inspiring, but inspiring crypto researcher that wants to go out and look around? Because you did share, hey, if you guys are in the bank, when you see these like divot like things, that's one. Is there anything that you could share?
Well, I just want to say I'm just an old country boy. I grew up outside of Ford City, Alabama. And that's still to this day a little unincorporated place. And I didn't even grow up right there. I grew up out several miles from there. And I worked my way through college and got lucky and got a pretty good job and learned a lot. And then eventually I never gave up on my dream of working with the space program, or eventually, and it took a lot of school. I had to go back to school several times, but once I got to that point, though, they pretty much paid me to go to school. But anyway, I just the big thing was I got out there and just spent time in the woods looking around, and I tried to observe I tried to look critically at the things I was seeing. I remember when I was just a little boy over on the back side of the farm, I used to find these little teepee formations and out there in the woods. And I would see other things. I'd go down a fire break road, go back there going fishing. I'd come back out and there'd be trees pushed down across the road. Just keep your eyes and your ears open. I've researched now in 39 or 40 states, and I've been doing this since the mid '70s, and I'm not a believer. I'm a knower. I am not trying to prove they exist. I'm convinced that the government will never let you prove that they exist. So what I'm interested in doing is learning more about them and then teaching others about them. That's my motivation. Is just learning more about them and then teaching people. And and the more I learn, the more questions I have.
Yeah.
We discovered some of their little signs that they do. Oh, I'll tell you something. I'll give you a little tidbit. The X formations. Any of you that are out there in the woods very much, in Bigfoot country, you will sometimes come across these X formations, and they use our like fire breaks and power lines and country roads and stuff as travel routes often. And that's why you see a lot of signs and formations along roadways. Those signs and formations are not for us. They're not telling us to keep out. They're for other neighboring troops or family units of Bigfoot. And just because you don't see any of those doesn't mean there's not around. It just means that there's not troops competing over the same territory. Their territories are not bumping up against each other, because Bigfoot are not stupid. They're not going to waste energy. The old saying country folks have, good fences make good neighbors. Well, if you ain't got no neighbors, no use wasting money and time putting up fences. So, there are vast areas where there are Bigfoot in there, but the population density is very little, and you won't see territorial markers. But that doesn't mean they're not there. They're just not there as much as they are in other places. But when you start seeing a lot of territorial markers, a lot of X formations and bows and stuff like that, and that are interwoven, that that were not naturally made, that's when you know that you can have a pretty good population of Bigfoot in an area.
Right.
And but the one thing that I do know that they do that is directed against us, and it's not just a keep out sign, it's a keep the hell out or I'm going to tear you to shreds, is if you find a tree trunk jammed in the ground with the roots up in the air, those are often directed against us.
Okay.
And people will say, "Oh, loggers do that to mark bogs and stuff." Yeah, they do. But when you see a line of them up on the side of a mountain in Alaska that stretch for 2 or 3 miles down a side of a mountain range, that's not loggers doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or you see one of these, or you've been going in and out of the woods in this one area, investigating for several days, and you go home for lunch, and go back, go for lunch, and you come back, and right in the shoulder of the road, there's a 6-inch diameter wild cherry tree jammed down into the shoulder of the road about 2 feet deep, and with the roots sticking up in the air. The logger didn't do that.
Right.
Right where you had been coming and going in and out of the woods. Yeah. That's one thing. That's the one formation that they'll do that I know is directed against us.
That's like their no trespassing, keep out.
Right.
All right.
Right. And they do mess with us. It's fairly common to go into an area and then you're coming back out, and there's been a tree pushed down across the road. There's been no big wind or storm or anything like that. That's fairly common. And but you know, I tell you a good word of advice, and I tell everybody this, and it's a mandatory on anytime I go into the woods or take anybody in the woods with me, is when we go in and we're going to get out of our vehicle, you turn that vehicle around and you point it in the fastest and safest way out.
Yeah.
You make sure that that if you have to make a hasty exit from a place, that you can jump in that vehicle, crank it up, throw it in gear, and put her to the floor, and you're pointed out. You're not having to turn around or a bunch of crap like that.
That's some solid advice. I mean, just you don't have to be an Einstein to figure out why.
Right. And if you're the driver of the vehicle, you keep the damn keys on your body, on your person. You leave your keys in your vehicle and some kind of crap starts happening, the scared people are going to jump in your vehicle and lock your damn doors, and they will not unlock them to let you in. Trust me on that. Trust me on that. I've seen it happen time and time and time again to people.
Right. Well, we are right at the mark. Like I said, guys, I feel honored. I hope you guys all enjoyed Mr. Tim Coonbo Baker coming on. And he was gracious enough to agree to come back sometime. Thank you for coming on. It was really an honor, and I know that, you know, you're a busy guy. And so,
it's an honor for me.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah. And, I mean, you know, like I said, I'm interested in sharing my knowledge.
Yes, sir.
Another little tidbit that part of my story here should illustrate is you should always be, any good researcher is willing to go back and relook at their data and change their mind.
Yeah.
Based on new evidence.
Always be open-minded, because, you know,
right.
And I've always said, like, I don't know anything. I'm always learning. Like, that night that you and I spoke, I felt like some of the stuff I thought I knew but really didn't know just got tossed out of the window. And you've got to be really open-minded, because it's a subject based on theory and hands-on. I mean, unfortunately, like you said, the government is not going to give us one of these bodies or anything. We're not going to know the biology of these creatures for a very long time, if ever. So, I mean, you've just got to be really open-minded. So, that 3 hours that I spent with you on the phone was a really good educational learning for me, and I appreciated it.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate the compliment. I tell a lot of things, but there are a few things secrets I hold close to my chest, because I have to have some way of evaluating, you know, things that people tell me, knowing whether they're blowing smoke or, you know, or telling the truth. And but you know, but I have learned that some of the things that people tell me that I've sort of blew off at the time, I got to go back and look at that again. In fact, I went back and re-interviewed those people back in 19. I didn't get to do it right away, but in 1985 or 86, I went back and re-interviewed those folks that I had interviewed back in 1978 that had where the as we know now, the Dogman looked in the kitchen window at them, you know. and they were like, "Well, we tried to tell you." I said, "Well, I just didn't know," you know. Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I definitely gotta cut the podcast short for right now, but I will still be able to give you a couple minutes of my time.
Sure.
Everybody have a great night. And Mr. Coonbo, would you like to say goodnight to everybody?
Yes. Good night. night, folks. It's been, like I said, it's been my pleasure to get to talk to you guys tonight.
And there you have it, folks. I hope you all enjoyed tonight's second half as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is, after all, your support that helps this channel to continue to grow and go, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant. Keeping an eye on children, pets, family, and our friends. These creatures are real. These events have happened. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.